Welcome to the Authors Forum. I'm your host, Dr. Veronica Esagui, chiropractic physician, and the author of the Scoliosis Self-Help Resource Book and Veronica's Diary, The Journey of Innocence, Braving a New World, and Awakening the Woman Within. My guest today is Alter Wiener, one of the very few Holocaust survivors still living in the Portland area. He has shared his life story in the state of Oregon and Washington in universities, colleges, schools, churches, synagogues, prisons, companies, and book clubs. Mr. Wiener received an honorary bachelor's degree from Warner Pacific College and an honorary law degree from Lewis and Clark Law School. Mr. Alter Wiener is the author of the autobiography From a Name to a Number. Mr. Alter Wiener, it is an honor to have you here in the show with me today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And I wanted to say that before we met, I always thank God for everything before I went to sleep. That's part of my heritage to do that, or part of myself to do that. But once I heard you speak about what you went through your life and all the things that you suffered and endured during the Holocaust, I decided that I should be saying thank you, God, for every little bit of thing of my life every day. And right now, I want to say thank you, God, for bringing you here today.
Thank you.
And I mean it that way.
Thank you.
Your book, From a Name to a Number, what does the title imply to those that have no idea?
When I got to the last camp, Waldenburg, a real concentration camp, and this was in 1944, they stripped us naked. Anything that we still had from home, they took away. I don't even have a birth certificate till this very day. And they gave us a uniform consisting on a jacket, trousers, a shirt, an overcoat, a cap, and a number. This is the first time that I got a number 64735. And for me, this was a very traumatic experience. Picture yourself, you don't have a first name, a last name, just a number. So when I already decided to write a book, thinking about the title, so this came to my mind that I lost my name and they gave me a number. This was a very, very tough camp, Waldenburg in Germany. Very isolated. I didn't see a woman or a child for 8 months. I didn't see my own face for 8 months because there were no mirrors in that camp. When I was liberated, the first time I looked at the mirror and I saw myself, I asked, who is that person? I didn't see a flower or a meadow for 8 months. It was a terrible, terrible camp. Picture yourself, you get up in the morning, you don't have a towel, a toothbrush, toothpaste, the most basic human needs we are deprived of.
And how old were you when you...
When I was in that camp, I was 17 and a half, 18 years old. When I was taken the first time, I was only 15 and a half years old. And if you remember the way I was taken, they came in the middle of the night, they knocked at the door, they busted into our apartment, they looked at me, they didn't ask my age. They just told me in the German language, you have 3 minutes to get ready. My stepmother pleaded with the German. He's such a young boy. He's 15 years old. He needs a mother. I love that boy. Don't take him away from me. What did the Germans do? They hit her and she fell unconscious. You dare to question our action? And they took me away. I never had a chance to say goodbye to my stepmother and to my younger brother.
The dedication in your book, From a Name to a Number, is in memory of your parents and family. Why is that?
Because just that I felt that my book is going to last, I don't know for how many years, but that's the best thing I could do. All those people, we don't know, they never had a funeral. They don't have a grave. We don't even have the anniversary when they were murdered. Besides my father, that I mention him, I do know when he was murdered on September 11, a very infamous day, but it was September 11, 1939. And I do know my biological mother when she died, because I used to visit her grave every year, at least 5 times a year. But all the others, you know, millions, and some others, not just Jewish people, they never had a funeral. They have no graves. And there's not even an anniversary of their demise. So this is a very painful experience. Most people don't realize that. When I watched the television on September 11, 2001, and I saw those World Trade Center towers collapsing, what came to my mind? Are those people consumed in that inferno? Are they going to have a funeral, a grave? Apparently over 2,000 have never been identified. And this is a very painful experience that most people don't realize. It reminds me, the other day I spoke in Concordia University, and one of the students stands up, he says, Mr. Wiener, I know exactly what you mean, because my brother drowned here in the state of Oregon, and his body has never been recovered, and my mother is miserable that she cannot visit her son's grave. And here we are talking about millions of people, including millions of Germans that never had a funeral and they have no graves. So this is a painful experience, because especially for me, I come from a culture that I used to visit my biological mother's grave at least 5 times a year. And today, I don't have that ability.
Right, right. Do you ever go back to the town where you were born?
I did go back after the war.
Yes.
This was the only way to find out who survived. Mm-hmm. You go back, because we didn't have computers, and even the Red Cross couldn't provide you with reliable information. So the way to find out who survived, you go back to your hometown, and you wait. If somebody survives, he's going to show up. In my case, 4 cousins of mine did show up, and 123 members of my extended family, my grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, they were all murdered.
Number 64735 in your book cover. Can you tell us what that number represented?
This is my number.
Mm-hmm.
Each inmate, or they call it Häftlinge, had a number. And they had a file. The Germans were very efficient. They kept a file for every prisoner by numbers. Yeah. Or you have, you're in the army, you have a number.
So there was the number,
just to keep record.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have been getting a check from Germany every month for the last 60 years. When I submitted a claim, I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that in the 1950s, Adenauer, the first chancellor of Germany after the war, mm-hmm. he came out apologizing to the Jewish people for the Holocaust. And he suggested to compensate, or as they call it, Wiedergutmachung. Wiedergutmachung means a gesture of goodwill. So all the survivors had to submit a claim, and that is what I did, and they found my file right away by 64735. I don't have a tattoo, mm-hmm. but it was given to me on a badge attached to the garments. And this was my number, 64735. This I'll never forget.
I read in your book about Rachel, your stepmother that came into your life when you were 5 years old. And I read in your book that once she said, there are 2 ways to deal with the cold. Put on a fur coat to be warm, or light up a fire so that others can be warm too.
She was such a wonderful woman. Mm-hmm. In fact, recently on Mother's Day, somebody called me from Montana. Mr. Wiener, today is Mother's Day. I read your book. I didn't know your telephone number. I called the publisher. I had to tell you something. The way you describe your stepmother, she should be a model for all mothers. Mm-hmm. She was a very, very warm person. And I do mention this in my book. Before I sat down to eat, I had to go and bring a dish to one of the tenants in our building, 24 building. He was a lonely person.
Imagine.
And she asked me to take it to him before I sat down to eat. She was a very compassionate person. And I'm so pleased that she was willing to take care of me. Because after my father was murdered, she could just let me go. She mm-hmm. had no legal interest to take care of me, but she did, like she took care of her own child.
So would you say that in many ways your inner strength came from her wisdom that she passed on to you?
I think that she had a tremendous impact on my philosophy, I would say. And I'm so grateful to her. I just feel very bad knowing that she was taken to Auschwitz on February 18, 1943, together with her son, my little brother at the age of 8. And they probably perished there the same day, because, as you know, those very young and the elderly were not taken to camps, to concentration camps, to work. A boy of 8 cannot be considered to be a worker. They were taken directly to a killing center. There were 6 killing centers in Poland: Auschwitz, Majdanek, Treblinka, Chelno, where people, the elderly and the very young, were taken directly to be murdered. I don't use the term killing because this was systematic murder. You can be killed in a car accident, but this was different. They were all murdered.
Oh, many people probably wonder, when the Germans invaded Poland, did your family try to escape?
Yes, we did try to escape, especially if you remember the little town that I come from, Chrzanów, was very close to the German border. And most people didn't imagine that Germany will be able to take over the entire country of Poland, a huge country, 35 million people. But how do you flee? In this town of Chrzanów that I come from, 22,000 population, half Jewish, half Roman Catholic, nobody had a car. I know for an Oregonian it's very difficult to imagine people live without a car, but that's a fact. Nobody had a car, the trains didn't run as they should. So people took personal belongings on their back and walked. And those who could afford, they hired a coachman with a horse-drawn wagon, and they tried to get away. And that is what my father did. He could afford it. He hired somebody. And we did try to get away. And I say we, it's my stepmother, my older brother, myself, my younger brother. My father couldn't join us because the Polish retreating army gave him an order, you stay put, because we need the groceries in your business. But we did manage to get away about 40 miles to a location called Dąbrowa. And when we got there, the Germans were there already. So we didn't accomplish anything by our attempt to avoid the Germans. The Polish army was no match to the mighty, mighty German forces. And as you know, Poland was occupied within a very few weeks.
Well, there was no escape. Many people can't even think of that. You know, it's so, we live in a country where wherever you want to go, we can just get the car and go. And to even think in those terms of walking, it's just beyond the imagination. How far could you walk?
It is a very interesting point. Because one of the students mentioned in my book, how could you live without a car? Or how could you live without a telephone?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you remember, I walked every weekend 1.5 miles to see my grandparents, to wish them a happy weekend, to show them my respect, my love. They never gave me a toy or a game, they couldn't afford it. But this was my responsibility as a young kid, to show my respect to the elderly or to a teacher. It was a completely different environment. We had to be disciplined and we had to respect the elderly people.
On page 58, the reason I'd like to bring it about, because I'm very moved. It's not just that you wrote a book, it's a historical book, it's about human disgrace as well as human value that you brought out. But along the way, with this book that you have written and your talks at schools, you have touched many children's lives. And one student told you that he was a very vengeful person, but would be no more thanks to you. And then you also had a letter from a student that was going to kill herself and change her mind when she heard you speak.
I've been getting so many letters, as of now, 46,000 letters. And the way it works, the teacher takes the letters from the students and put them in one envelope and mailed it to me. When I opened them, I read all of them.